My life flipped twice because of the same man first, when his silence on an icy sidewalk cost me my job second, when he showed up in my church kitchen with dishwater on his hands, like he'd always belonged there, and somehow both versions of him are real. That winter morning at the Briarwood Grill, the cold slapped you awake before the coffee did. I had 3 to go, cups balanced on a metal tray, shoulder pushing open the door, head already doing rent and bill math. Then the door swung wider than I meant, and this tall guy in a charcoal coat barreled in with his eyes on his phone instead of the floor. His shoe hit a patch of ice outside the step, and he just went out, legs flying. I threw the tray, grabbed his sleeve, managed to slow him so his head missed the concrete. Coffee went everywhere, hot and dark in the bitter air all over his expensive coat and my apron. I dropped to my knees, heart hammering. "Sir, are you okay? Are you burned?" He blinked, shaken but alive. "I think I'm all right," he said. And for a few seconds it was just him and me. Me in worn sneakers, him in shoes that had never seen a puddle. Then the diner door banged open. "Tiana, what did you do?" My boss, Mr. Daniels, filled the doorway. Face red, tie crooked. He took one look, saw coffee, saw a wealthy white man on the ground, saw me on my knees, and wrote the whole script in his head. "You threw hot coffee on a customer. Have you lost your mind?" "No, sir." He slipped the ice, he bumped me. I started. The man on the ground tried too. It was my fault I wasn't look, but Daniels steamrolled right over both of us. "You people never take responsibility," he snapped, then grabbed my arm so hard, my elbow slammed the metal frame. "Don't talk back. You're done here, you're fired." That word hit colder than the concrete, I heard myself say, please, before my pride could stop me. "Mr. Daniels, I need this job, my rent, my brother's tuition," he slipped. "I was trying to help, please, and—" "Yeah, I begged because sometimes dignity doesn't pay the light bill." Daniels just said, "Get off my property before I call the police and report an assault." And that word assault hung there like a threat. We all understood, so I turned to the only person who could slice through the lie. "Sir, please tell him you saw what happened." He looked at me, really looked, and I watched the truth rise into his eyes. Then something heavier dropped on it, money habit, fear. "I don't know, all I know is he said nothing." And that silence did the job. I walked back through the diner with every table watching, and nobody speaking, emptied my tiny locker, grabbed my bus pass, and the picture of my mama in a church kitchen, and stepped out into the cold. He was still there, coat steaming from coffee and air, guilt all over his face, but not one word aimed in my defense. "Take care, sir, and watch your step next time." I said, my voice cracked, but I kept walking like the city hadn't just spit me out. That night in my little room over the pawn shop, my elbow throbbed and the smell of somebody else's dinner drifted through the floor. My brother texted. "You off early? I can bring leftovers," I almost typed. "They fired me because a rich man couldn't open his mouth instead," I wrote. "Just tired, don't worry, love you," because he already carried enough. Next morning, muscle memory, and my mama's example sent me to church, not to the sanctuary, to the kitchen. New Hope Community in Briarwood, 3 buses away. Down in that basement, it was loud and warm and smelled like onions and hope. Miss Gloria looked at my face, said nothing, held up an apron. "You staying or passing through?" "You got room for one more pair of hands?" I asked. "I can chop stir-scrub anything." "Grab a knife, baby onions." "Ain't gonna chop themselves," she said. By noon, my back hurt, my elbow complained, but something in my chest loosened. I was still broke and jobless, but at least I was useful. That's where Pastor Green found me, tall, gray at the temples, tie, always a little off-center. He pulled me into his cluttered office. "I heard what happened at the grill," he said. Is the whole city talking already? I tried to joke. We talk when one of ours is hurt, he answered. That's not gossip, that's survival. I stared at my shoes. He fired me in front of everybody. I begged it didn't matter. Begging rarely moves a stone heart, he said. But standing up will carve one. You just don't always get to pick the moment. We'll help you find work, and for what it's worth. Someone's been asking about you. My stomach dropped. Who, I asked. He just smiled like he'd read the last page. That night, leaving after dinner service, hands smelling like garlic and dish soap, I saw a black SUV roll slow past the alley. The window slid down just enough for me to see him. One man, same sharp profile, different eyes, guilty. Now he didn't get out. Didn't wave, just watched me walk past. Like every sentence he should have said was stuck behind his teeth. I didn't stop, didn't glare, just kept walking. A couple days later, he stopped being a shadow in a car and became a problem in my kitchen. He walked straight into New Hope's basement, like he wasn't out of place at all. Miss Gloria took one long look and muttered, "Well now, Wall Street found the wrong address." He wore jeans and a flannel that still somehow looked tailored. "I came to help," he said. "You know how to wash dishes without breaking them?" Gloria asked, arms folded. "I can learn," he said. She jerked her chin toward the sink, aprons on that hook, no speeches. And just like that, the man whose silence got me fired was elbow deep in church dishwater at 6 in the morning. I made sure plates piled up in his station if his conscience wanted to work. I had plenty of dishes. After a while, Gloria tossed us 2 chipped mugs of coffee and said, "Sit." So we did, metal table between us. "Why are you really here?" I asked. "No sugar on it." He looked older than he had on the sidewalk. "Because when I fell, you were the first person in a long time who didn't want something from me," he said. "That's not true." I told him I wanted you to tell the truth. I wanted to keep my job. He swallowed, jaw tight. "I should have spoken up," he said quietly. "I didn't. And I hate the version of me that walked away." "Then stop trying to rinse him off with a sponge," I said. "You want to make this right. It's not about me going back to the grill. It's bigger than that." He nodded slowly. "My name's Lucas," he said. "Lucas Warren," I shrugged. "Nice to officially meet you." Lucas, since the unofficial meeting cost me my paycheck. I still didn't understand how big bigger was until a few days later, when one of the aunties at our tenants' council slapped a shiny brochure on the table, Briarwood Renewal, across the top. Pretty pictures of our blocks without our faces, and down at the bottom a little headshot of Lucas in a suit, smiling like the future belonged to him. "You know this man?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I do." When he finally told me himself, we were standing outside the church after a long meeting, breath clouding in the cold. "I'm the lead investor on the project, buying up this neighborhood," he said. "I came here to sign off and fly home." Then that morning outside, the grill happened. I laughed, no humor in it. "So this is your redemption movie. The billionaire who discovers poor folks have souls. You know what I mean?" "I don't want a story," he said. "I want a different outcome. Teach me how to do this without erasing everyone who's already here." "You really want to learn," I told him. "Show up where the folding chairs are. Not just the leather ones. Listen. When Miss Ruth tells you how many times her rent went up for somebody else's dream, and understand this isn't about your conscience. It's about our survival." The twist wasn't that he nodded. The twist was that he actually came week after week. He sat in those hard chairs taking notes while neighbors lined up to tell him what men like him had done to them. Miss Ruth stared him down and said, "Boys like you come through here every few years with a new word for the same thing. Urban renewal, revitalization, innovation. Corridor, it all smells like eviction to me." And he didn't argue. He said, "Then help me write something that doesn't." While we were in church basements, he was in glass conference rooms picking fights. I only heard about later, like the meeting where his partner spread demolition charts across a gleaming table, red circles around the church. The diner, the whole strip, and Lucas pointed to a little community impact clause he'd once thrown into their contracts to feel decent and said, "We're invoking this, nothing gets knocked down until the council signs off." They told him he'd never work in that state again, that investors would walk that nobody trusted, a developer who let feelings slow bulldozers. He told them he'd rather lose a deal than his soul. Yeah, that happened. What I saw was an envelope that showed up at my apartment, delivered by a girl from the grill, who still looked at me like I'd set my own life on fire. Inside was his messy handwriting and a stack of pages. "Tiana, I can't undo my silence. But I refuse to be that man again. The church stays affordable. Units stay. Your council gets veto power. You don't owe me anything, but I owe this place the truth, Lucas." We spread that contract on a plastic table, kids coloring in the corner, while grown folks argued over commas. It wasn't perfect. But for the first time, I saw people who'd always been on the menu actually help write the menu. We voted yes, not because we suddenly trusted rich men, but because for once we had our hands on the pen. That's when the backlash hit. Investors bailed, called the plan emotionally expensive. Headlines said Lucas had lost his edge, whispered that some girl from Briarwood had made him soft. Then one night, at 2 in the morning, I woke to sirens and red and blue light bouncing off my ceiling. I ran outside and saw the old Wilson building, one of the shells we were turning into an art space, on fire. Flames chewing through wood like it owed them money, neighbors in pajama pants, kids crying, smoke everywhere. Lucas pulled up, eyes wild. "Anyone inside?" he yelled. "No, but it's gone," Jamal shouted. The fire marshal said, "Accelerant tampered panel suspicious." We called it what it was, a message. A few days later, after they cleared the site, I walked through the burned-out shell ash sticking to my shoes, found a half-burned flyer under a beam, one line still readable. "Let them have their ashes." My stomach turned. I brought it to Lucas, watched his jaw clench. "They don't just want us to fail," he said. "They want anyone watching to think we were fools to try. Then we don't just rebuild," I told him. "We plant something here. They can't burn." That's how the garden happened. The Wilson Memorial Garden. People who barely had enough for their own bills sent $10, $20 a note, that said, "For the ones who stayed," a local artist welded a sculpture of 2 metal hands, one dark, one light, planting a small tree. We put it right where the wiring had melted. The city sent one last test, a quiet man in a gray suit to audit every receipt like we were the ones stealing. Not the companies that had been overbilling us for years. He sat in our office for days, flipping through crumpled receipts and volunteer sign-in sheets, found nothing he could use on his way out, he said. "You're doing something unusual here. It usually doesn't end well," and I told him. Maybe that's exactly why we can't quit, the day we dedicated the garden. The sky over. Briarwood was finally clear. Kids ran around with dirt on their hands. Elders sat on donated benches. The metal hands caught the sun. I took the mic and told my neighbors, "This isn't charity. This is a line in the sand. This is us saying you don't get to decide, we're rubble." Not this time. When I looked over, Lucas was in the crowd, not on the stage that mattered. A few months later, we handed the first set of keys to a family who'd been living 3 deep in one bedroom. Mr. Jefferson's hands shook so hard I had to fold his fingers around the keys. "This is yours," I said. "Not a favor, not a loaner, your home behind him." The garden bloomed around him. The block finally looked like a place that believed it deserved to exist. That night when the food was gone and the crowd went home, I walked back to the garden and found Lucas sitting on the low wall. Tie loose shoes, dusty, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man who'd just gone 12 rounds with himself. You regret it? I asked, picking our side instead of theirs. He watched a couple kids chasing each other around the sculpture. I used to think the worst thing that could happen was losing a deal, he said. Now I know it's walking away from one like this. You know, they're not done with you. I said the investors, the city, the ones who liked you better when you made them rich and quiet, I know. He said they already call me reckless, emotional, weak. I laughed. Welcome to the adjectives. They hang on us every day. He smiled at that, then looked at me different. Do you think there's ever a point where I've done enough to make up for that morning? He asked. I thought about the ice, the firing, the contracts, the fire, the garden, the keys in shaking hands. I don't think that's how this works, I said. The scale doesn't balance clean, you just decide which side you're standing on when it tips. He nodded quiet, then asked the question. Everybody else whispers, what about us? He said. Do you think we ever get to be more than just allies in a fight? I let that hang there over the flowers and the faint scorch marks still on the brick next door. Let's finish building first, I said. Then we'll see what's still standing. You can call that a non-answer, but here's what I know. I was the girl on her knees on the ice while a man with power stayed quiet. I was the one they fired in front of a whole room and left to ride the bus home with coffee on her shoes. I'm also the woman who sat at the table when we rewrote the rules for a whole block, who helped draw the lines around what they could and could not take, who turned a burned building into a garden with two metal hands that look a little like mine and a little like his. So I want to ask you if someone stands by while you're humiliated and then later risks their money, their status, their comfort to stand with you. Is that enough? Would you forgive them? Would you work next to them? Would you hand them a pen and let them sign beside you? Or would you tell them to take their guilt and go back where they came from? And what about neighborhoods like Briarwood? Maybe you've watched a place you love get revitalized without the people who made it worth visiting. Maybe you've seen a version of me or a version of Lucas in your own city, your job, your family. I'm really curious where you land on this, so if you're still here, tap like. So this story can reach someone who needs it. Share it with that friend who's seen this kind of thing up close and tell me in the comments. Who do you think was more right in this story? The girl who refused to kneel again, or the man who finally stopped looking away? And do you believe in second chances when the first mistake cost somebody everything?